In this lesson, we'll learn how to navigate using a very simple drop-down menu. I've got a completed file here and I'll demonstrate how this should be working. So let me just go up to Control Test Movie, Test. And you can see here I've got a label for the pages just to let us know that our navigation is working. And over here we've got what looks like a button. And if I roll over it, it actually has a submenu, and when I roll away the submenu disappears. So rolling over exposes three other buttons, if you will, and rolling out hides them. Now if I go to these other buttons, I'm already on home, but if I click next page, I go to page 2. And I've actually got a third button here that will actually launch a website. If I click that now, let's go! There's the website. And when you're testing in Flash, it actually will launch whatever your default browser is to make sure that that works. So let me just quit Firefox here and go back. So I've tested that and it all seems to work. Oh, if I go back to home, it does take me back to home. So again, simple navigation with a drop-down menu where the submenu disappears when we roll away and it reappears when we roll over the menu button itself. Okay, so let me show you the file, how this is built, and I'll help you along the way to show you how to create the ActionScript in ActionScript 3.0 to build this. Now I'm on my main timeline right now, scene 1, and you'll notice that I've got 4 layers. One actually has the movie clip, which is the menu, and I'll get into that shortly. But the next layer up I've called pages, and if I go to page 1, it's just got really a text item on the stage and a keyframe to hold that. And then the next one over, which is it looks like at frame 7 here, has different text to indicate that I'm on a new page, and again it's keyframed in. Now if I look at the next layer up, I'm using frame labels for my navigation, and you can read them in here. This is why I span this out so you can read it, because technically this could have been on 2 frames. But you see the little red flag and the frame label. And this is what we're going to refer to when we start coding this. And then finally up in my top layer is my actions layer. And if I click on this and open my actions panel, you see I've just got a very simple stop command in there to hold my playhead in place. Now let's drill down into the menu. I'll double click on that movie clip. And you'll notice that it's running over 2 frames. This is how this trick, if you will call it a trick, works. Again, in frame 1, in my actions layer, I've got a stop command, and I'll go over some of this other code shortly here. Frame 2, if I move my playhead over, I've got not only that original button, but 3 other instances of this generic yellow button. And if you look on top, I've just got text labels on top, which are actually separate from the buttons. They are not part of the button. The button is simply the yellow box. If I go to my library, I can show you that. Here's the yellow box. So I can leverage that and use it over and over and just apply different ActionScript referring to each. The retract button is actually this invisible button here. We've learned how to do invisible buttons, and this is how I do my roll off. You see it looks like my main button is an island surrounded by water. Again, this water is actually my invisible button. When I roll over this button, I'm triggering the playhead to go back to frame 1. So in frame 2 I have the invisible button, in frame 1 I do not. And if I double click on this invisible button, you'll see that there's nothing in any of the states except for the hit state. And again, that's how we create an invisible button, by having something in the hit state, and at the very least nothing in the up state, but in this case nothing in the up, over, nor down state. So let me go back up to the movie clip called menu, and we'll go to the first frame. So again, remember I'm inside of the movie clip called menu. I'm not on scene 1. The concept here, and it's a little more advanced I guess, is that we're actually going to try to navigate by clicking on a button inside of menu, which will actually navigate the playhead in scene 1 up top here. So we're going to be going up a level, which is known as a parent, or in this case we're going up to the root, which is the main timeline. So I'm going to double click back on this movie clip menu and show you how that's done. So I think I'll just go back up to scene 1 for a second and just explain the ActionScript in frame 1 here on my actions layer. It's a simple stop command, and you can either type that in your actions panel, or you can again go to your code snippets and under timeline navigation just double click stop at this frame. And I've already got it in place, as you can see, with the frame highlighted. If I go to actions, I've got the stop command and of course the commented set of instructions. So that's all you need for your main timeline, your route, if you will. So do put your frame labels in on keyframes. Call the first one home, call the second one page 02, and put some graphic on the stage to let you know that you are actually on those distinguished pages. And then in the bottom layer, I've got the movie clip called menu. So I'll double click on that and we'll get back into there. So again, I have the menu inside of scene 1. Again, on the first frame, I've got a stop command, but I also have a command that says when my mouse rolls over this button, and not click, but roll over this button, it sends my playhead to frame 2. And that creates an illusion of having these 3 buttons pop out. And you do not see this light blue area. That's the invisible button. Okay. And that invisible button, in fact, has a rollover event. When triggered, we'll go back to frame 1. So we're actually using 2 rollover events in here. On the first frame, we roll over the button. It sends us to frame 2. On the second frame, when we roll over the invisible button, it sends us back to frame 1. So let's look at how we can create that rollover button. First thing I need to do is highlight the button itself. And again, the button is simply the yellow box. I'll remind you that this text was just placed on top, separate from the button. That way I can use that same generic yellow box for all of my buttons. Okay, so I've highlighted the button on the stage. Let me go to my properties and just show you that the button has an instance name. This is critical. If you ever want to refer to buttons on the stage, they need to have an identification, which is our instance name. Now with buttons, it's conventional to use an underscore btn. So I've called this menu underscore btn. Okay. So now with that named, with an instance name, I highlight it, go to my code snippets, and instead of clicking go to frame and stop, because I don't want to base this on a click, I want to base it on a rollover. I'm going to collapse this. I need to go down to event handlers. And if I open up event handlers, you can see we've got mouse events. So mouse click, mouse over, mouse out, key events as well. But I want the mouse over. So I would double click mouse over event. And it places the code in here. All I need to do now is replace this trace command with a go to and stop. So I want to send my playhead to frame 2. So it's go to and stop. It needs to be upper and lower case, just as you see it here. And then the brackets, and then the frame number inside of there, and then a semicolon. Okay, so let me just close this. And that's the first step. So I've used a mouse over event to send the playhead to frame 2. Okay, now let's deal with the second set of frames, if you will, inside of our movie clip called menu. And that's where we see what are known as the drop-down menu items. And again, they're just different instances of that same yellow button that is in my library. And I just dragged it out and positioned them into place here. So I've literally got 4 instances of the same yellow button. And just to repeat myself, I just literally put a text item on top of them so the user would know which was which. And then they're surrounded by an invisible button that you can see here, which was drawn, if I double click it here, inside of the hit state, it was just drawn as a solid object. Now when you're drawing something like this, the one thing you need to be very aware of is to turn off your stroke color. And I'll just draw a little bit more in here. And my fill color is black right now. If I just use my rectangle tool, again, I can continue to add to the shape. With the stroke set at 0 or at none, these shapes will all merge together. If I click on there, you see they are all instantly merged together. If I had put a stroke in, they would have actually distinguished themselves from each other, and it just would have been a real pain. I'd actually have to go around and delete all of the strokes and then merge the fill. The idea here is that just have one fill and no stroke going all around. Okay, and you see I did leave a little bit of breathing space. You don't want to get too tight. Give it a little bit of breathing space, but definitely surround it all. Okay, so that's the invisible button inside of the hit state. Let me go back up to my menu here. Now again, all of these buttons have instance names. If I highlight that invisible button and I go to my properties, I've called it rollout_btn. So you need to manually go in and name all of your buttons. And I've already done this. If I click on the home button here, home_btn, the next one down is called nextpage_btn. And then the third one down, which is going to be a bit different, it's going to be a web link. I've named weblink_btn. Okay, so all of my buttons, all 5 buttons, have instance names. Now on my second set of frames, I actually didn't name the menu button because I didn't want it to respond. Once I'm over at the pull down section, if you will, this should not have any response anymore. Only when it's on frame 1 do I want the mouse to trigger the event based on the rollover. Once I'm already here, we've already reached our destination, if you will. And what will trigger the playhead to go back to frame 1 is the invisible button. Okay, so let's look at the code here. Frame 1. Highlight my actions. And again, you see there's a stop command, and I use the mouse event mouse over to generate the second set of code as we just did. And you see here, here's the code for that. Well, all of this is the code for the rollover. And of course, the instructions are commented out. So we're going to do pretty well the same thing on frame 2 for all 4 buttons. If I highlight that, I'll show you. Now I didn't need to add a stop command here because the previous command said go to and stop. So I didn't need to be redundant by adding another stop command. But if I scroll down here, you can see the reference right here in the code. And again, we'll get more in depth on how this code works, but for now, just recognize that instance name rollout_btn, and the code that gets executed is the go to and stop 1. And that's my invisible button, that rollout. And if I go down, you can see reference to all of my other buttons. Now this is different here, and I'm going to actually redo this, but I'll show you here. If I close this for a second, because we're inside of a movie clip, but I want to navigate on the timeline that's above it in scene 1, which is also known as our root timeline, I need to modify the code to deal with that. I can't simply say go to and play or go to and stop, because when I do that, I am referring to the current timeline. But I want to refer to the parent timeline, or the root timeline in this case, which again is that main timeline in scene 1. So let me go back to this code and explain what I had to modify. You see here highlighted, I've got movie clip brackets root. Flash actually sees the main timeline as a movie clip, believe it or not. So we have this formal instruction called movie clip, capital M, capital C, and in brackets I'm saying go to movie clip called root, and then I'm appending that with the command with a dot, so movie clip brackets root dot. So then once I'm on my root timeline, I'm saying go to and stop frame label home. And you remember frame labels go inside of brackets, inside of quote marks inside of the brackets. They do need the quote marks when I'm referring to a frame label. If I was referring to the frame number, I would have simply typed in the number in the brackets. So you can see that for my home button, and if I scroll down here a bit further, my next page button, which I've labeled page 02. Okay, so I think what I'll do is I'll actually delete these and re-implement them just so you can see. So I'll delete all of this, select all and delete, and redo that. Okay, so I'll start with the invisible button because it's referring to something on this timeline. Then I'll get into the slightly more complex button. So I highlight the button, go to my timeline navigation, again, click to, actually I want this to be a rollover, not a click, so let me go down to event handlers. Mouse over event, double click it, and replace the trace command with a go to and stop. So go to, capital A, capital S, and then brackets, and I want to send it back to frame 1. So I just put a 1 inside of the brackets there, and I'll close that. So that's based on a rollover. It's going to send my playhead back to frame 1. Now let me address the home button. This time I want it to be a mouse click, so I'll go back to timeline navigation. Click to go to, frame, and stop. So two things I need to do here is I actually need to change the navigation to say go up to my root timeline. So I'll go in front of the command, go to and stop, and I'll just add that movie clip, brackets, root, dot, and then the command go to and stop. And because I'm referring to a frame label, I'm going to replace that frame number with a quote mark and the name of the label, which is home, and close quote marks. And close this. And I'll do the same for next page. So highlight that button, double click in my code snippets, click to go to frame and stop, and then append this code. Again, I'll actually just copy it from here. Movie clip, brackets, root, copy that, paste that in front of the go to and stop. Again with the dot. So this is basically navigation dot command, command go to and stop, and I'll highlight that 5 and replace that with the quote mark, page 02, which is what I'd named the label, and close those quote marks and close this. Save my file and carry on. Actually, you know what I'll do? I'll actually test my movie right now, and then we'll do the last thing, which is how to set a link to an actual external web page. So let me do a control, test movie, test. Okay, there's my rollover. And again, you'll have to manually create that yellow box button, and I've put in a different color on the upstate and the overstate. So the upstate is yellow, the overstate is orange. And again, when I roll off, see when I'm rolling on, I'm actually sending my playhead over to frame 2. When I roll off, I'm actually rolling onto the invisible button, and it sends my playhead back to frame 1. So let's say I go here and I click home. If I click home, I should be sending my playhead on the root timeline to the label called home, but I'm already there, so let me click next page. Next page, and voila, we've sent our playhead to the frame label called page 02 on the main timeline. Even though this is a nested movie clip, I can't speak to any level in the hierarchy as long as I understand that I need to put that navigation in front of the command. And we haven't done the third button yet, but if I click home now, it should go back to the frame label home, and it does. So far so good. One last thing I want to do is show you how to create a web link. So let me highlight that third button down, DJO Studios, go to my code snippets, and I'll just collapse this here. And under Actions, we have click to go to web page. Nice and easy. Double click that. And again, here's our code all generated for us with the instructions, but I'll cut to the chase here. You just literally need to go and replace the web address. So I'm going to put djostudios.com. Oh, I already have that there. So djostudios.com. And what does this blank mean? Comma blank. That means it's going to pop up in a new tab or a new browser window, depending on your browser. So we'll close that, close that, definitely save my file, and give this a test. And roll over, pops open the submenu, click on the different links, and it navigates, and then I'll click on the link to go to a new web page. And when you're testing, it just pops open your browser.
Let's go!
And if it pops open in the browser and goes to the web page, you know that it works perfectly well. So let me just quit Firefox. And that's how we can create a simple pull-down menu in Flash.